Bravo, #1. That's right, the bunkhouse brawl in the Boston Gardens. There are no rules. I can cross-check, I can high-stick, I can do whatever I want to people like the Hart Foundation, Tugboat, Hacksaw Jim Duggan. That's right, and as you all well know, the Montreal Canadiens always kick the butts of the Boston Bruins.
Dino Bravo was only 43 when his life was brutally cut short. A wrestling career behind him, but a future that was never to be. What happened in those final years that led to such a violent end? This is his truth, and we as fans deserve to know it. Dino Bravo, born Adolfo Bresciano on August 6, 1948 in Italy, was a well-known wrestler in Canada and the US. He grew up in Montreal and started wrestling in the 1970s, quickly becoming a big name. Bravo won many titles, including the Canadian Heavyweight Championship and the WWWF Tag Team title. In the WWF, he was known as Canada's Strongest Man and later, World's Strongest Man. Dino Bravo was one of those wrestlers who had the look of a superstar, big muscles, strong jaw, and the kind of presence that made people stop and watch. He looked like someone who was born to be a champion. But if you dig a little deeper into his story, you'll see that his path through wrestling wasn't smooth at all. In fact, it was full of twists and turns, both inside the ring and out of it. There was always something dramatic going on in Dino Bravo's life. He had the power, the physique, and the attitude of a tough guy. But behind all that, there were a lot of things going on that most people didn't know. One of the most talked about moments in his career happened during the 1988 Royal Rumble. It was meant to be a huge moment, something that would show off how strong he really was. The plan was simple. Dino would lift an unbelievable 715 pounds in a bench press, live in front of the crowd. The whole thing was set up to make him look like the strongest man in the world. Fans were excited, and the cameras were rolling. But when the moment came, people started to notice something strange. As Dino struggled to lift the bar, the commentator Jesse Ventura casually put his hands under the weight, clearly helping him out. Later on, Ventura joked that he only used his pinkies, but fans knew what they saw. It was a setup, a staged event meant to boost Dino's image. Even though it wasn't real, Dino didn't back down. He took that moment and ran with it, proudly calling himself the world's strongest man from that day forward. Some fans thought it was fun and entertaining. Others thought it was a bit of a joke. But no matter what people thought, that moment showed a change in Dino's style. In the early part of his career, he was a fast and technical wrestler. He could move around the ring and put on a real show. But by the late 1980s, he had slowed down a lot. His matches became more about power than speed. He used moves like stomps, bear hugs, and his powerful side slam. The wrestling world was changing, though. Fans were starting to enjoy faster, more athletic wrestlers, and slowly the kind of power-based wrestling Dino was known for began to feel old-fashioned. Before he ever joined the WWF, Dino Bravo was already a huge star in his hometown of Montreal. He wasn't just wrestling there, he was also running things behind the scenes. He was a part owner of a major wrestling promotion called International Wrestling. It was one of the biggest in Canada at the time. Being in charge gave him power, but it also created some tension. Some wrestlers felt like Dino was protecting his own spot on top and not giving younger wrestlers a fair chance to move up. Jacques Rougeau, another wrestler from Montreal, later said that he left the promotion because Bravo and the other owners didn't want him in the main event. It's kind of ironic, really, because Jacques went on to become a star in WWF, while Dino's own promotion eventually shut down. In the end, Dino had to follow the same path and join WWF too. But the part of Dino Bravo's life that really made people raise their eyebrows didn't have anything to do with wrestling at all. There were always rumors that he had connections to organized crime in Montreal. His family had ties to the Cotroni crime family, which was one of the most powerful criminal groups in Canada. In fact, his own aunt was married to Vic Cotroni, a known mob boss. These weren't just small rumors that people laughed off. These were the kind of whispers that stuck with Dino everywhere he went. There's one story that shows just how serious people took those rumors. Back in 1988, there was some real-life tension in the WWF locker room. The Rougeau brothers were having problems with the British Bulldogs. Things got physical when Jacques Rougeau actually punched Dynamite Kid in a backstage fight. After that, Jacques decided to play a prank. He told Dino Bravo that he had put out a Mafia hit on Dynamite Kid, just as a joke. But the problem was, Dino believed him. He took the joke seriously and passed on the message. The prank got way out of hand when Dynamite Kid also believed it. He was so scared that he sold his house and moved his entire family, thinking his life was in danger. Years later, Jacques admitted it was all a prank, but the fact that everyone believed it so easily shows just how real Dino's criminal reputation felt at the time, whether or not it was actually true. Despite all the controversy, Dino still had close friends in the wrestling business. One of his best friends was Rick Martel, another well-known Canadian wrestler. When Dino's career started to slow down in the early 1990s, Martel tried to help him out. He went to WWF and pitched an idea. What if he and Dino teamed up as a tag team? Martel said he would do most of the work in the ring. He just wanted to help keep Dino employed. But WWF said no. Pat Patterson, one of the big names in charge, told Martel that Dino just didn't fit into their future plans anymore. Wrestling was moving in a new direction, and there wasn't a place for Dino in that vision. After Dino Bravo retired from wrestling in 1992, his life took a dramatic turn, and unfortunately, not for the better. He was only 43 years old at the time, still young, still strong, and still very recognizable to fans in Montreal and across Canada. But wrestling, which had once provided him fame and steady money, was suddenly gone. The big paychecks from the WWF had stopped, and with a wife and a young daughter at home, Dino found himself at a major crossroads. What was he supposed to do now? Most retired wrestlers in those days either went to work for smaller promotions, tried their luck in Japan, or opened up wrestling schools. But Dino wasn't like most. He didn't want to move away. He had already spent most of his life traveling from city to city, hotel to hotel, living out of suitcases. At that point, he just wanted to stay in Montreal and be close to his family. So instead of chasing more wrestling opportunities elsewhere, Dino stayed home. And sadly, that decision led him straight into a world far more dangerous than professional wrestling. Not long after stepping away from the ring, rumors began to swirl that Dino Bravo had become involved with organized crime in Quebec. More specifically, people believed he was working in the illegal cigarette trade. Now, to be clear, selling cigarettes wasn't illegal in itself, but in Canada, cigarette taxes were very high. So a black market had formed where smugglers brought in untaxed cigarettes, usually from the United States or low-tax areas, and sold them at much cheaper prices. It was a shady business, but a profitable one. And in the early 1990s, that business was booming. Dino's ties to the criminal world weren't just rumors made up out of thin air. He had real connections. Family ties, to be exact. His wife's uncle was none other than Vincenzo Vic Cotroni, the former boss of the powerful Cotroni crime family in Montreal. This was one of Canada's most infamous mafia families. After wrestling, Dino allegedly became more involved with them. According to some sources, he wasn't just sitting on the sidelines. He may have worked as a debt collector and enforcer, someone who used his size and reputation to convince people to pay up. And with the cigarette smuggling business taking off in Quebec, he got pulled into that world too. Oddly enough, Dino's past fame actually helped him in this new line of work. He was a well-known figure, a local celebrity, and that gave him some influence and opened doors. One of the most surprising parts of his post-wrestling story involves the Mohawk First Nations people. Some Mohawk communities controlled important smuggling routes along the St. Lawrence River. Lawrence River, which is part of the Canada-US border. These groups had ways to move goods, including contraband cigarettes, across the border with little interference. Now here's where it gets interesting. Many members of the Mohawk communities were huge wrestling fans, and when they met Dino Bravo, someone they had watched on TV for years, they were thrilled. According to Rick Martel, Dino's longtime friend and fellow wrestler, Dino quickly built a relationship with the Mohawk smugglers. They trusted him, liked him, and even gave him something close to an exclusive partnership. Martel later said, Dino had a monopoly with the Indians. He started doing really well. And by all accounts, that was true. He was making big money, way more than he could make training young wrestlers at a local gym, which he also did on the side. But as you can probably guess, success in that world comes with a price. The more money Dino made in the illegal cigarette business, the more attention he attracted, and not the good kind. According to reports from crime journalists and even old friends, Dino's growing profits caught the eye of more dangerous people in Montreal. One theory is that a major drug trafficking group approached Dino with a proposal. They wanted him to cut the Cotroni family in on the deal. In return, Dino would get a cut of their drug profits. It was supposed to be a business deal, a partnership. But things didn't go according to plan. In early March 1993, Dino had arranged for a large shipment of illegal cigarettes worth around $400,000 to be delivered and stored in a warehouse. For a couple of days, the shipment just sat there. On the third day, when the associate finally went to pick it up, it turned out to be a police sting. The whole thing was a setup, and the shipment was seized by the authorities. Just like that, hundreds of thousands of dollars were gone. That kind of loss wasn't just bad business. In the criminal world, a mistake like that could be deadly. There are a few stories about what happened next. Some say Dino was furious with the person who delayed the pickup, saying, "You should have picked it up on the first day." Others believe that his new partners thought Dino had set them up, that maybe he had warned the police or kept them in the dark on purpose. Whatever the case was, trust broke down quickly. And when trust disappears in the criminal underworld, violence usually follows. From that point on, many believed Dino Bravo was a marked man. He had made serious enemies. And not just any enemies, but dangerous ones. People who didn't deal in second chances. Friends say Dino knew he was in trouble. Even Brett Hitman Hart later shared that Dino had confided in some people. He told them he didn't think he had much time left. He had gotten involved with the wrong people, and he knew it. It's important to say that Dino Bravo was never officially arrested or charged with any of these crimes. Everything we know comes from investigative journalists, old wrestling friends, and law enforcement sources who spoke anonymously. But most of them agree on one thing. Dino had gotten involved in something way over his head. He may have been tough in the ring, but the world of organized crime was a whole different battlefield, one where strength alone wasn't enough to survive. And so, in the final months of his life, Dino Bravo lived with a cloud hanging over him. Even in retirement, Dino couldn't shake the storm that had followed him. And on March 10th, 1993, that storm finally caught up to him, in the most chilling way possible. It was a regular evening. Dino stayed home watching hockey on TV while his wife and daughter went to a ballet class. They lived in Laval, a quiet suburb just outside Montreal. Nothing seemed out of place. But when Diane came home that night, what she walked into was every spouse's worst nightmare. She carried their sleeping daughter through the front door. The lights were still on. The house felt calm, but then she reached the living room, and her world fell apart. Dino Bravo was sitting in his chair, slumped over. The TV was still playing. The remote was still in his hand. And there was blood. Blood on the floor. Blood on the ceiling. Blood everywhere. He had been shot 17 times. 7 times in the head, 10 in the chest. No chance to run. No chance to fight back. Whoever did it made sure he wouldn't survive. It was an execution. There were no signs of forced entry, no broken windows, no busted locks. That meant one thing. Dino knew his killers. He had let them in. He had probably sat there with them, maybe chatted for a few minutes, thinking nothing of it. Then while watching a hockey game, they ended his life. The way it happened told investigators everything they needed to know. Multiple shooters, 2 different types of guns, a .22 caliber and a .380 caliber. Silencers were likely used because no neighbors heard a thing. Not one gunshot, not one scream. Just silence. And that silence, it was deadly. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong. It wasn't a random act of violence. It was precise, calculated, professional. It had all the hallmarks of a mob hit. News of Dino Bravo's death hit Montreal like a bomb. Front pages were plastered with his photo. The once muscular wrestling star, now the victim of a gangland-style murder. But the headlines didn't just focus on his fame in the ring. They leaned into something darker, his alleged ties to organized crime. Within 24 hours, police sources were already confirming it. Evidence of cigarette smuggling had been found in the home. And just like that, the rumors that had followed Dino for years were back in full force. Everyone started asking the same question. Was Dino Bravo killed over a cigarette deal gone wrong? Some believed Dino had been working with a drug trafficking group in addition to his ties with the Cotroni crime family. Maybe he was trying to balance too many dangerous relationships. Maybe someone thought he had tipped off the cops. Or maybe he was just in the wrong place at the wrong time, surrounded by people who didn't forgive mistakes. Whatever happened, it's clear that someone wanted Dino Bravo gone and made sure there would be no coming back. His brother, Gino Bresciano, pushed back hard against the rumors. He told reporters the media was spinning lies, printing garbage about Dino's involvement in smuggling. There had never been a trial, never any formal charges. To him, the world was crucifying a man who wasn't even around to defend himself. But even close friends, including wrestlers and Montreal crime reporters, weren't so sure. They admitted that Dino had been in way over his head. His fame had helped him make connections in the illegal cigarette business. But fame doesn't protect you in that world. If anything, it paints a target on your back. Police struggled to move the case forward. No witnesses came forward. No one would talk. If this really was a Mafia hit, then silence wasn't just expected, it was enforced. People knew better than to open their mouths. And without evidence, suspects, or confessions, the case went cold. Over the years, other theories came and went. Some people wondered if it had been personal, maybe a jealous lover, or even a former wrestling rival. But these theories never stuck. They lacked motive. They lacked evidence. They felt more like desperate guesses than real leads. The most likely answer remained the simplest one. Dino Bravo was killed over money, over cigarettes, over criminal alliances that had crumbled. He had played a dangerous game and lost. Dino's family was left shattered. His wife and daughter were forced to carry the weight of that night for the rest of their lives. They didn't just lose a husband and a father. They lost him in the most violent, public, and painful way imaginable. That image of Diane walking in, her daughter asleep in her arms, and finding Dino's lifeless body still haunts those who knew him. He was laid to rest at Notre-Dame-de-Neige Cemetery in Montreal. Many from the wrestling world came to say goodbye. The same men who had shared locker rooms and wrestling rings with him now stood in silence, wondering how things had gone so terribly wrong. In April 2020, Dino Bravo's story got a new spotlight thanks to the hit documentary series Dark Side of the Ring. In Season 2, they aired an episode called The Assassination of Dino Bravo. It featured interviews with his wife Diane, their daughter Claudia, friends from the wrestling world, and Montreal crime reporters. It gave viewers a chance to see the human side of the story. Not just the headlines, but the heartbreak. The documentary didn't uncover new answers, but it made one thing very clear. Dino Bravo was a man caught between two worlds. One was filled with fame, cheers, and championship dreams. The other was filled with secrets, shadows, and silent enemies. And once he crossed that line, there was no going back. As of today, no one knows exactly who pulled the trigger. No one has ever been charged. The case remains open but frozen in time. Another file in the cold case unit, collecting dust. And maybe that's the most painful part of all, because Dino Bravo wasn't just a wrestler, he was a husband, a father, a man who made some bad choices, but he didn't deserve to die like that. Alone, betrayed, and forgotten by the very world he once thrilled. So the question still lingers. Who killed Dino Bravo? And will we ever know? But what we do know is that his legacy was exceptional, and he deserves a quick rundown of his epic career. So here we go. Let me tell you the story of a man who went from a small town in Italy to becoming one of the most recognizable wrestling figures in Canada and beyond. His real name was Adolfo Bresciano, but the world came to know him as Dino Bravo. Dino was born on August 6, 1948, in a little town called Campobasso, nestled in the heart of Italy. Life there was simple and traditional, but when Dino was still a young boy, his family decided to chase better opportunities and move to Montreal, Quebec, in Canada. Now imagine being a young immigrant kid in a big new city. Everything was different. Language, culture, even the weather. But Dino quickly found something that helped him feel at home: wrestling. At just 12 years old, he started training in amateur wrestling, and it became his passion. As he grew older, Dino caught the attention of a local wrestling veteran named Dino Bravo. Gino saw something in this strong, determined young man. He took Dino under his wing and started mentoring him. Under Gino's guidance, Dino made the jump into professional wrestling in 1970. He wasn't called Dino Bravo yet, though. That came shortly after, when he adopted the name from another wrestler who had used it before. It had a certain flair to it, tough, bold, memorable, and it fit him perfectly. In those early days, Dino often wrestled alongside his mentor, Dino Bravo. They were even billed as cousins to build excitement among fans. Wrestling promotions loved to play up family angles like that. The duo mostly wrestled in the Montreal territories, where Dino was beginning to build a name for himself. His big break came on August 25, 1972, when he made his debut for Grand Prix Wrestling in Quebec City. He squared off against a wrestler named Frenchie Martin and won. It was a promising start, but the real highlight came a few months later. In November 1972, Dino and Dino Bravo took on a powerful tag team, Gilles Fish Poisson and the legendary Killer Kowalski, and defeated them to win the Grand Prix Tag Team Championship. That was a major accomplishment and a clear sign that Dino was becoming a star in Quebec wrestling. But Dino wasn't content with just local fame. He wanted more. So in the mid-1970s, he started expanding his career across North America, wrestling in different territories, and gaining fans everywhere he went. In 1974, Dino made his way to California and joined NWA Hollywood Wrestling. On November 7, 1974, he had his first match there and pinned a wrestler called the Canadian Wolfman. It was another victory on a new stage. Soon after, he teamed up with another wrestler, Victor Rivera, and together they captured the NWA Hollywood Tag Team Championship. They had exciting matches against top tag teams like Greg Valentine and John Tolos and the Hollywood Blondes. The California fans loved his style, tough, energetic, and full of heart. In early 1975, Dino and Dino Bravo joined a brand new promotion called the International Wrestling Association, IWA. It was ambitious, trying to become a national wrestling powerhouse. They went after the tag team titles again, this time against a team called the Mongols, but didn't win. Dino also had his eyes on the IWA North American Championship, but a major title win escaped him there too. Still, all of this was great exposure. Dino was no longer just a local star, he was becoming known across the US and Canada. Next, in 1977, he challenged the massive Blackjack Mulligan for the US Championship. Though he didn't win, it was clear that Bravo was being taken seriously. That same year, he had an unforgettable match against Harley Race, the reigning NWA World Heavyweight Champion. Dino pushed Harley to the limit, and their match ended in a time limit draw. For those unfamiliar with wrestling, that meant neither man won, but going the distance with a world champ? That was a victory in its own right. By this time, Dino was starting to look like a complete package. He had the look, the strength, the experience, and the respect of fans across multiple territories. Then came 1978, and with it, a chance to shine on the biggest wrestling stage of that era, the Worldwide Wrestling Federation run by Vince McMahon Sr. This was before the WWE became the global giant we know today, but it was already a huge deal. Dino made his debut in January 1978, and it wasn't long before he found success. He teamed up with a wrestler named Dominic DeNucci, and the chemistry between them clicked. On April 1st, 1978, in a major upset, they defeated the legendary team of Professor Tanaka and Mr. Fuji to win the WWWF World Tag Team Championship. This was a big deal. Winning titles in regional territories was impressive, but doing it on the national stage of the WWWF, that was next level. Dino and DeNucci held the titles for a few months, defending them against all comers. Eventually, they lost the belts to the Yukon Lumberjacks in June 1978, in none other than Madison Square Garden. Even in defeat, wrestling in MSG was a career highlight for many, and it added to Dino's growing legend. He also had a decent singles run during this time. He even got in the ring with superstar Billy Graham, a former world champion known for his flashy style and powerful physique. But by the end of 1978, Dino decided to leave the WWF and head back home to Canada. Returning to Montreal turned out to be a brilliant move. Dino was now a full-fledged star, and fans in Quebec welcomed him as a hometown hero. He was no longer in someone else's shadow. He was the main event. In December 1978, he proved it by defeating the legendary Gene Kiniski, a former NWA world champion, to win the NWA Canadian Heavyweight Championship in Toronto. That title had serious prestige, and now it was Dino's. Throughout 1979, he successfully defended the title against top talent, including none other than Ric Flair and Greg Valentine. Beating guys like that wasn't just about wins, it was about respect. These were some of the best in the world, and Dino was holding his own. After spending most of the 1970s becoming a household name in Canadian wrestling and even making waves across the US, Dino Bravo did something a little unexpected when the 1980s rolled around. While many wrestlers were chasing the spotlight in bigger American promotions, Dino turned his focus back to where it all began, Montreal. And not just to wrestle, but to build something lasting. You see, by 1980, Dino wasn't just another performer looking for his next match. He wanted more control. So he helped build and eventually co-owned a wrestling promotion called Varusak Promotions, which later became known as International Wrestling. This wasn't some small weekend-only operation. It was a full-fledged promotion that aimed to keep Montreal's wrestling scene alive and thriving in a rapidly changing industry. Dino wasn't just wrestling here. He was the face of the company, the top draw, the hometown hero who packed arenas and inspired local fans. And behind the scenes, he was making decisions about who got pushed, what matches happened, and how the stories unfolded. It was a position of serious power, and Dino didn't take it lightly. In 1981, he won the International Heavyweight Championship, the biggest title in the promotion, and he didn't just win it once. He held that belt multiple times over the next few years. He went up against a wide range of opponents, many of them international stars who were brought in to spice things up and test Bravo's dominance. Wrestlers like Abdullah the Butcher and King Tonga, who later became known as Haku, gave him a run for his money, but Bravo was usually the one standing tall at the end. The fans loved it. Dino wasn't just a wrestler to them, he was a symbol of Quebec pride, someone who had made it on the big stage and then came home to elevate the local scene. And he didn't stop with singles success. He also teamed up with Tony Parisi in 1984 to win the International Tag Team Championship. Whether in tag matches or going solo, Dino was front and center, night after night. But not everyone saw things through rose-colored glasses. Some of the younger wrestlers coming up in the promotion, like Jacques Rougeau of the famous Rougeau family, felt like they were being held back. Jacques would later say that it became clear there was a ceiling above him, and that ceiling had Dino Bravo's name on it. It's not that Dino wasn't talented, he absolutely was. But when you're also helping run the company, and you're the top star, well, people start to wonder if you're stacking the deck. Still, you can't deny that Bravo was drawing crowds. He was selling tickets, putting butts in seats, and that matters in wrestling. In fact, at one point in 1985, there were serious rumors about a dream match. Dino Bravo versus Hulk Hogan. That would have been massive. Hogan was the biggest wrestling star in the world at that time, and Bravo was still Montreal's golden boy. The buzz around it was real, but it never came to be. Why? No one really knows. Maybe politics, maybe timing, maybe something else. But the match stayed a what-if forever. As the mid-1980s rolled in, the wrestling world started to shift dramatically. Vince McMahon and the WWF were growing fast, turning into a national and eventually global powerhouse. One by one, regional promotions like Dino's were getting pushed out or absorbed. The territory system that had kept wrestling regional for decades was crumbling. Dino saw what was coming, so in 1985, he made a tough choice. He closed the doors on international wrestling and joined the WWF full-time. When Bravo returned to WWF television in late 1985, it was as if he had picked up where he left off. He was introduced as the Canadian Heavyweight Champion, a title he had held in Montreal, though it wasn't officially recognized by WWF. Still, the crowd knew who he was, especially in Canada, and initially he was still a good guy. He teamed with King Tonga and the two of them even scored a surprise win over WWF Tag Team Champions Brutus Beefcake and Greg Valentine at a house show in Montreal. It was a cool little moment for the local fans. But not long after that, Dino disappeared from WWF programming again. It was quiet, no farewell, no storylines. Just gone. And then, a few months later, he came back. But this wasn't the same Dino Bravo. This new Bravo was bigger, a lot bigger. His muscles were noticeably larger, his dark hair had been bleached blonde, and his presence in the ring had changed. He looked more intense, more aggressive, and the smile, it was gone. He returned as a heel, a bad guy, by turning on the beloved Rougeau brothers, immediately generating heat from the fans. He joined forces with luscious Johnny Valiant and eventually paired up with Valentine again to form the new Dream Team. They were tough, no doubt about it. They had some solid matches and chased the tag team titles, but they never quite reached the top. By the end of 1987, the team split, and Dino once again set out on his own. But this time, the WWF had a whole new identity for him. In early 1988, Bravo was rebranded as the World's Strongest Man. It was a bold new gimmick that fit his larger-than-life appearance. He got a new manager too, Frenchie Martin, who would wave the Quebec flag while holding signs that read, "USA is not okay." Together, they played the anti-American card, and boy did it work. Fans hated them, and that's exactly what they wanted. At the 1988 Royal Rumble, Bravo took center stage in a live bench press exhibition, attempting to lift a ridiculous 715 pounds. Jesse the Body Ventura, a former bodybuilder himself, was on commentary. The drama was thick. Bravo struggled with the weight, and then ever so subtly, Ventura helped him lift the bar just enough. Bravo claimed the record, and the crowd exploded. With boos, it was one of the most memorable sports entertainment moments of that year. With his new strongman image, Bravo launched into a feud with Ken Patera, an actual Olympic weightlifter. They had a series of contests, tug-of-wars, arm wrestling matches, and of course, plenty of in-ring fights. Bravo usually came out on top, even attacking Patera with a tug-of-war rope to seal the deal as the villain. Later that year, Bravo pulled off a major win by pinning the Ultimate Warrior in Montreal. Sure, he had to cheat to do it, but a win was a win. He also defeated Don Morocco at SummerSlam '88, keeping his momentum going. But then he ran into Hacksaw Jim Duggan, and things got tricky. They battled over national pride in a series of flag matches, and Duggan ended up handing Bravo his first televised pinfall loss. It was a big moment that signaled Bravo might not be invincible after all. Still, he stayed in the mix. In 1989, Bravo switched managers again, this time aligning with the energetic and loud Jimmy Hart. He picked up a win at WrestleMania 5, and then began feuding with Hercules, another strongman character. It was a classic clash of muscle versus muscle, and Bravo mostly had the edge. But maybe one of the most important moments of this era came when Bravo introduced the world to a newcomer named Earthquake. During a segment on TV, Bravo randomly pulled this giant man from the audience to sit on his back during a push-up challenge with Ultimate Warrior. Earthquake ended up flattening Warrior and kickstarting his own path of destruction. He and Bravo became a team, causing chaos across the WWF, especially targeting top names like Warrior and Hulk Hogan. Bravo kept trying to chase Warrior's Intercontinental Championship, but Warrior beat him clean in early 1990. At WrestleMania 6, Bravo lost another high-profile match to Jim Duggan. And although he remained involved in big feuds, especially during Earthquake's rivalry with Hogan, it was clear that Bravo's role was starting to fade. By 1991, it was even more obvious. WWF was moving toward a new generation of stars, and Bravo, now in his early 40s, was being phased out. He started losing more often, and at that year's Royal Rumble, his old tag partner Greg Valentine threw him out. Just like that. There was one more surprise, though. Later in 1991, Bravo returned with a babyface turn. He was a good guy again. He even attacked the Mountie and split from Jimmy Hart. In Montreal, he dyed his hair back to its natural color and got a few big wins. For a brief moment, it looked like the old Dino was back, but it didn't last. His final WWF match came in early 1992 in Montreal. It was billed as his retirement match, and he beat the Barbarian to close out his run in front of a hometown crowd. He wrestled a few more times on a European tour, including a match against Bret Hart, but his time in the spotlight was clearly over. And that was the end of Dino Bravo's in-ring story. A story that started in Italy, grew in Montreal, exploded on the national stage, and came full circle. After this, he met his tragic end. One moment that fans still talk about is when he tried to bench press over 700 pounds during a WWF show. He had help from another wrestler, but the crowd still gasped. It was all part of the show, but it left an impression. That smug look he gave the audience afterward made people love to hate him. But over time, things started to change. Dino wasn't moving as quickly in the ring. Some people said his matches were getting boring. Younger, faster wrestlers were starting to take over. By the early 1990s, Dino was mostly used to help those new wrestlers look good. And just like that, he was gone. He quietly left the WWF. No big farewell, no goodbye speech. He just disappeared from the spotlight. After he left wrestling, things got hard. The money stopped coming in, but Dino still wanted to live the good life. He had gotten used to it, nice house, cars, comfort, and to keep that lifestyle, he started getting involved in things outside of wrestling. Dangerous things. In 1993, something terrible happened. Dino Bravo was found dead in his home. He had been shot 17 times. It looked like something out of a movie, a mob-style killing. People were shocked. Dino Bravo was no longer just remembered as a strong wrestler from Montreal. He became known as the wrestler who was murdered by the mob. That one event overshadowed everything else he had done. It's sad, but true. But those who knew him remember more. They say Dino was a fun guy. He loved being famous. He loved making people smile. He was generous and proud. He worked hard to build a good life. Rick Martel, one of his close friends, said Dino always wanted more. He wanted to give his family the best. But the pressure got to him. He started making choices he had once promised he would never make. Even Bret Hart, another wrestling legend, talked about Dino in his book. He remembered Dino as someone who brought joy to the locker room, but he also believed that Dino felt lost after wrestling. Without support, without a plan for the future, Dino ended up in a very dark place. In Montreal, people still talk about Dino Bravo with pride. He was one of the few French-Canadian wrestlers to make it big on the world stage. Fans remember watching him live, hearing the crowd cheer, and feeling the energy in the air. Montreal sports shows still bring up his story now and then, because it's not just a wrestling story, it's also a story about fame, crime, and how hard it can be to leave the spotlight behind. Dino Bravo was never inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame. Many believe that's because of the way he died, but others say he deserves to be there, not just for his time in WWF, but for what he meant to Canadian wrestling. He helped open the doors for others. He showed that a local boy from Montreal could make it big. Dino Bravo's story is not just about wrestling. It's about dreams, fame, and the choices people make when the lights go out. His rise from small gymnasiums to packed arenas showed his strength and determination. His fall into the world of crime and his tragic death showed that even the strongest men have weaknesses. Today, nearly 30 years later, people still remember Dino Bravo. They remember the cheers, the boos, the flashy moves, and sadly, the shocking end. His story is part of wrestling history, one filled with both glory and pain. And that's the story of Dino Bravo, a man who lived for wrestling, built a legacy, and then found himself in a world far more dangerous than the one inside the ring. His life was full of highs and lows, from the bright lights of WWF to the dark rumors that surrounded him. Was he truly involved in crime, or was he just in the wrong place at the wrong time? And what really happened on that fateful night in 1993? What do you think? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe for more wrestling stories, and ring the bell so you never miss an update. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.